In the beginning, there is the faintest whisper in the soul, barely perceptible beneath the roar of the world, a murmur, like the wind rustling through forgotten ruins, carrying the ancient ache of something unseen, something neglected, yet always present. This is the voice of the shadow, the dark twin, the hidden self, the part of us we were told to exile, to shun, to fear. But what we banish does not die. What we repress does not dissolve. It festers in the caverns of the unconscious, gaining form and power in silence until it erupts, sometimes in rage, sometimes in sorrow, sometimes in a haunting sense of meaninglessness that poisons the very well of life. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is not the enemy, it is the doorway. And so I ask you now, what parts of yourself have you forsaken? What raw, untamed energies lie bound beneath the surface, yearning to be known, to be integrated, to be healed? In Psalm 139 it is written, "If I make my bed, in Sheol you are there. Even in the depths of the abyss there is presence, there is light." The descent into the shadow is the archetypal journey of every soul. It is the first step on the road to individuation, that perilous pilgrimage from fragmentation to wholeness. But to descend, to truly descend, one must be willing to confront the illusions of the ego, that brittle mask we wear, that curated identity we present to the world. The ego says, "I am only what is good, acceptable, praiseworthy." But the soul whispers, "I am all that I am, light and darkness, order and chaos, creation and destruction." The healed shadow is not about taming the wildness within you. It is about acknowledging it, embracing it, standing naked before it, without judgment, without fear. It is written in Proverbs 20:27, "The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the innermost parts of his being." To heal the shadow is to light this lamp, to venture courageously into the caverns where the monsters dwell, only to realize they were never monsters at all. They were the guardians of your deepest truths, but few dare, for the path into the shadow requires the death of certainty, the collapse of false narratives, the undoing of all that is comfortable and known. It is the archetypal journey of Christ into the wilderness, 40 days and nights alone with the tempter, confronting the very essence of human frailty. And so too must we enter our own wilderness. No guide but the flicker of inner truth, no map but the ancient symbols that arise in dream and vision. The serpent coiled at the base of the spine, the wolf howling in the night, the mirror cracked but reflecting nonetheless. These are not just images, they are messages from the unconscious, inviting us to see not only what we are, but what we might become. For the shadow is not only the repository of our wounds, but also of our potential. The aggression you repress could become the courage to defend your truth. The envy you deny could be transformed into the ambition to realize your destiny. The rage you suppress could ignite the fire to break your chains, but only if you dare to bring these energies into the light of consciousness. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To heal the shadow is to cease running, to stand still, and to say, "Yes, this too is me." The poet David wrote in Psalm 23, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because the valley is necessary." The shadow is not death, but transformation. It is the crucible in which the fragmented self is burned away, leaving only the essential, the true, the eternal. And so, in the furnace of inner confrontation, the ego begins to crack, the illusions crumble, the persona melts. What emerges is raw, vulnerable, but real. Here, in this sacred ruin, we meet not the shadow as enemy, but the shadow as teacher, and the first lesson it offers is humility. For how many times have we condemned in others what we secretly feared within ourselves? How many times have we projected our own disowned parts onto the world, blaming, attacking, retreating, all to avoid facing the reflection in the mirror? This is the game of the unconscious, and the price is our peace. The healed shadow ends this war. It reconciles the opposites. It brings the lion and the lamb to lie down together within the heart. As the ancient words say in Ecclesiastes 3, "To everything there is a season, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up." The journey through the shadow is the time to break down, so that in time we may build up, not a false self, but a whole self. The self, in the Jungian sense, that transcendent totality of all we are and all we are yet to be. But we are not there yet. First, we must go deeper, into the layers beneath the shadow, where the primordial forces of the collective unconscious pulse like ancient drums, where the archetypes stir, where the myths of all humanity are written in symbols older than words. Here, we face the primal images that shaped us long before we had language. The hero, forever called to adventure. The mother, offering both nourishment and devouring. The trickster, weaving chaos and forcing growth. These are not fantasies, but fundamental structures of the psyche, and whether we know it or not, they guide our choices, our fears, our loves. To heal the shadow is not only to reconcile with our personal darkness, but to awaken to these deeper patterns, to see that our suffering is not isolated isolated, but archetypal, that our pain is not meaningless, but mythic. In this realization, something shifts. The shame begins to dissolve, the fear softens, and in its place, reverence. For the journey of the soul is not a linear ascent, but a spiral descent, and rise, again and again, each time deeper, each time more whole. This is the power of the healed shadow. It does not promise you a life without struggle, but it offers you a life of authenticity, of courage, of profound inner freedom. And as you stand at this threshold, know that the journey has only just begun, for beyond the shadow, beyond the personal, awaits the vast, mysterious realm of the self. Beyond the shadow, in the silent vastness of the psyche, we encounter the ego, the center of conscious identity, the fragile scaffolding upon which we have built the story of who we think we are. But now, with the shadow integrated, with the darkness no longer denied but embraced, the ego begins to loosen its grip. It trembles, and not out of weakness, but out of reverence for something greater that now emerges. The self, that radiant, mysterious totality of being, the axis mundi of the soul, the silent witness that was always there, watching, waiting, beneath the noise of persona and performance. Carl Jung spoke of the self not as an idea, but as an experience, a living reality that transcends the opposites, harmonizes the contradictions, and calls us home. The self is the imago Dei within, the image of God, the spark of the eternal planted within temporal flesh. And yet, how often have we mistaken the ego for the self? How often have we clung to titles, roles, achievements, thinking, this is who I am, only to find them hollow when life's inevitable storms strip them away? The wisdom of Proverbs 16:18 resounds here. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. For the ego, inflated, seeks to make itself the center, but the soul knows better. The self is the true center, the still point in the turning world. And yet, the path to the self is never direct. It winds through the dark forests of our unconscious fears, the rocky deserts of loneliness, the crashing seas of emotional upheaval. Each trial, each wound, each descent, not a punishment, but a summons, a call to shed another layer of falsehood, another mask, another illusion, until we stand, stripped of all that is not essential, before the quiet majesty of who we truly are. But to approach the self is to approach the numinous. It is to stand like Moses before the burning bush, trembling, for here, in the presence of the self, all pretense burns away, and what remains is awe. In Psalm 46:10, we hear the eternal injunction, be still, and know that I am God. Stillness is the gateway. In this stillness we recognize that the self is not something to be attained, but something to be remembered. It has always been here, in the depths, beyond the chattering mind, beyond the wounded heart, beyond the conditioned reflexes. The self is the source, and from this source, all true purpose flows. But how rare it is to live from the self. Most live confined to the surface, trapped in the endless cycle of persona maintenance, terrified of the silence that would reveal how distant they have become from their own center. Yet the healed shadow makes this return possible. It clears the path. It removes the internal barriers of shame, fear, repression. It allows the ego to no longer serve as a dictator but as a steward, in service to the self. This is the essence of individuation, not the pursuit of perfection, but the realization of wholeness, not the eradication of weakness, but the embrace of all parts as necessary, meaningful, sacred. Jung wrote, individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. To individuate is to step into the fullness of one's being, to cease living according to the scripts imposed by society, family, culture, and to live instead from the authenticity that emerges from within. This is not an easy path. It is the narrow road spoken of in Matthew 7:14. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. For to individuate is to risk everything familiar, for the sake of something infinitely more real. The journey into the self requires courage, but it also requires surrender, to let go of who we thought we had to be, to release the compulsive need to please, to perform, to prove, to accept the mystery of our own becoming. And in this surrender, something extraordinary happens. The rigid structures of the psyche soften, the once fragmented aspects of the self begin to communicate, to dance, to harmonize. The inner child, long silenced by wounds of the past, finds its voice once more, playful, curious, alive. The inner warrior, no longer chained by blind rage or repressed aggression, now stands as protector, as advocate, for the soul's deepest truth. The lover, the sage, the fool, the mystic, all these inner figures, these archetypal presences within, come together in an inner symphony, and the self conducts this sacred music, not with force, but with presence. This is the power of the healed healed shadow, not merely to rid us of suffering, but to reintegrate the disowned fragments, so that life becomes not a battlefield, but a work of art, a tapestry woven with threads of light and dark, joy and sorrow, triumph and failure. For the self does not seek to abolish opposites, but to reconcile them. It is the alchemical union of sun and moon, of spirit and matter, of heaven and earth. The medieval alchemists, in their cryptic language, called this the conjunctio, the sacred marriage, the union of opposites that produces the philosopher's stone, the symbol of wholeness, of transformation, of eternal life. This is not fantasy. It is the symbolic language of the soul, and we live it. Every time we choose integration over repression, every time we turn toward our pain with compassion rather than denial, every time we dare to ask not, what does the world expect of me, but what is my soul asking of me? For the soul always asks for truth, for courage, for wholeness. And though the world may seduce us with promises of ease, comfort, distraction, the call of the self is relentless. It is the voice that wakes us at 3 a.m. whispering, there is more. It is the ache in the chest when we betray our own values. It is the longing for something we cannot quite name, but that we know we must find. This Gao is the sacred restlessness of the human condition, and it will not be silenced until we answer, until we say yes to the journey, yes to the descent, yes to the transformation, yes to the becoming. And so, here you stand, at the threshold of the greatest adventure, the only adventure that truly matters, not the conquest of the outer world, but the reclamation of your inner world, the integration of the shadow, the unveiling of the self, the fulfillment of your soul's unique destiny. And yet, there is more still to face, for individuation is not the end, but the beginning of a life lived in conscious alignment with the deeper currents of existence, a life infused with meaning, guided by purpose, animated by love. But first, we must confront the final trial, the encounter with suffering, with mortality, with the impermanence of all things, for it is only by embracing the inevitability of death that we truly learn how to live. And so, we arrive at the precipice where all illusions must fall away, the place where every philosophy, every system, every mask we have worn stands silent before the primal fact of existence, suffering. It is here in this crucible of pain that the final alchemy occurs, for no journey of individuation is complete without the confrontation with suffering, and with death itself. The ancient words of Ecclesiastes ring out like a solemn bell. All go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return. This is the truth we spend our lives avoiding, burying beneath distractions, achievements, or the frantic pursuit of pleasure. But to live without acknowledging death is not to live at all. The healed shadow has taught us to embrace our darkness, but now we are summoned to embrace the darkness of life itself, the inherent fragility, the uncontrollable impermanence, the inevitable loss. This is the ultimate confrontation and the ultimate liberation, for in suffering, the ego cannot stand. Its fantasies crumble in the face of real pain. No curated persona can protect us from the ache of loss, the wound of betrayal, the weight of grief. And yet, here, precisely here, is where the soul is forged. It is here that we meet the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who is wounded not despite his power, but as the very source of it, as Christ bore his wounds not as marks of defeat, but as signs of profound transformative love. In Isaiah 53, the prophet wrote, "By his wounds we are healed." So too, we are invited to recognize that our wounds are not simply curses to be overcome, but openings through which grace may enter. The suffering we endure, the pain we carry, the losses we grieve, they are not meaningless. They are the fire that burns away the dross, that purifies the soul, that prepares the ground for the emergence of true wisdom and compassion. But this does not come cheaply. Requires that we surrender the last vestiges of control, that we stop asking, why me, and begin to ask, what is this asking of me? The great philosopher Viktor Frankl, who endured the unspeakable suffering of the concentration camps, wrote, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning." The healed shadow has prepared us for this, teaching us to face our own darkness. It has given us the courage to face the darkness of existence itself, and to find within it, not despair, but depth, not annihilation, but transformation. For as long as we resist suffering, it rules us. But when we turn toward it, when we allow it to break our hearts open, something miraculous happens. We awaken to a dimension of being that transcends both pleasure and pain, a state of radical acceptance, of profound compassion, of unshakable inner peace. This is the peace spoken of in Philippians 4:7, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, understanding will guard your hearts and your minds. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace that comes from having walked through the fire and emerged whole. The individuation journey, now tempered by suffering, is no longer merely psychological, it becomes spiritual. For in the face of mortality, we recognize that we are not merely isolated egos floating in an indifferent universe, but manifestations of something far greater. The breath that animates us, the love that moves us, the beauty that calls to us from sunsets, from music, from the eyes of those we cherish. These are not accidents, they are signs, symbols of the deeper reality that underlies all things. The self, once experienced as an inner center, now expands, becoming indistinguishable from the cosmos itself. The veil thins, and we perceive, however, briefly the unity of all being. This is the mystical core toward which all genuine individuation points, not toward self-aggrandizement, but toward self-transcendence, toward the realization that our individual story, with all its joys and sorrows, is part of a much larger story, the eternal dance of creation and destruction, of death and rebirth. And here, at last, the great paradox reveals itself. The more fully we accept our mortality, the more fully we can live. The more we embrace suffering as an inevitable part of the human condition, the more compassion we can offer to others. The more we integrate our shadow, the more light we can bring into the world. As it is written in 2 Corinthians 4:7, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us." We are fragile, finite, and yet, within this frail vessel of flesh, burns an eternal flame, the spark of the self, the imago Dei, the divine within, the healed shadow, the awakened self, the embraced suffering. These together form the foundation of a life of meaning, a life no longer driven by fear, but guided by love, a life no longer obsessed with certainty, but open to mystery, a life no longer fragmented, but whole. And yet, the journey does not end here, for now, we are called to return, to bring what we have discovered in the depths of the soul back into the world. The hero, having descended into the underworld, must rise, not to escape the world, but to serve it. This is the final movement of the individuation process, the return, the integration of all that we have learned, all that we have become, into the fabric of daily life, to live not as an escape from suffering, but as an embodiment of wisdom, not as a rejection of the world, but as an offering to it, to become, in the words of Matthew 5:14, the light of the world, not because we are flawless, but because we are whole, because we have faced the darkness and found the light within it, because we have journeyed through death and chosen life. This is the power of the healed shadow, not the elimination of darkness, but its transformation, not the conquest of fear and but its integration, not the denial of suffering, but its transcendence. And in this, we become what we were always meant to be, vessels of light, carriers of wisdom, embodiments of love, living symbols of the great mystery. And now, as the dust of the long inner pilgrimage settles, as the echoes of ancient voices fade into the silence of your own breath, you stand at the edge of a new beginning, for the healed shadow does not mark the end of the journey, but the moment you are finally prepared to walk it, fully awake, fully whole. This is the threshold where the soul ceases to ask, "Who am I?" and instead begins to live as the answer, no longer fractured by denial, no longer imprisoned by fear, no longer hiding from the raw, untamed truth of your own humanity. You have seen it all now, the brilliance and the terror, the light and the darkness, the beauty and the pain. You have tasted the wild sweetness of your own existence, and you have survived the bitter poison of your deepest wounds. And in this survival, in this integration, you have been transformed, no longer merely a seeker, but one who knows, not intellectually, not as a theory or a philosophy, but as a felt embodied truth, that within the darkness there is light, and within the light there is always the necessary trace of darkness. This is the eternal dance, the yin and the yang, the crucifix and the resurrection, the night sky pierced by stars. You have become part of this great pattern, not as an observer, but as a participant. The world is no longer something that happens to you. It is something that you, from the depths of your awakened self, co-create. And this is the quiet revolution of the healed shadow. Not a loud, triumphant conquest, but the simple, steady courage to live with integrity, to walk through the world with your wounds visible, not as marks of shame, but as badges of initiation, to speak your truth, even when your voice trembles, to love, even when your heart knows it may break, to create, even when you know that all things are impermanent. This is the life of the individuated soul, not a life free from suffering, but a life suffused with meaning, and meaning is the antidote to despair. Meaning is the bridge between the temporal and the eternal. Meaning is the invisible thread that weaves your small, precious story into the vast tapestry of the cosmos. And so, you walk now, not with the arrogance of one who thinks they have conquered their demons, but with the humility of one who knows that the work is never truly finished, for the shadow will always be there, whispering from the edges, testing, provoking, inviting you to go deeper still. The journey into the self is not a one-time event, but a lifelong unfolding, a spiral that draws you ever inward and outward, in a rhythm as ancient as the turning of the planets, as intimate as the beating of your own heart. Each time you face a new fear, a new loss, a new challenge, you will meet another fragment of your shadow, and each time you embrace it, integrate it, heal it, you will step closer to the ever-expanding horizon of who you truly are. This is the sacred task, the noble burden, the invitation extended to every human being, but answered by so few, for it requires everything, every illusion surrendered, every mask removed, every comfort willingly sacrificed on the altar of truth. But what it offers in return is everything, as it is written in Matthew 16:25, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." To lose the false self is to find the true self. To die to the ego is to be reborn in spirit. And so you stand now, reborn, not as someone who has transcended humanity, but as someone who has embraced it, fully and unapologetically. You feel the pulse of your own aliveness, not as something separate from the world, but as an expression of it. You recognize that the same breath animating your lungs moves through the trees, the rivers, the stars. The same creative force that shaped galaxies courses through your veins. The self is not in you. You are in the self. You are an aperture through which the universe becomes conscious of itself. And your life, your singular, unrepeatable existence, is a sacred note in the great symphony of being. So live it with courage, live it with compassion, live it with reverence for the dark places you have traversed, and for the light that now radiates from within you. And when the days grow heavy, wait as they will, when the old fears return, as they do, when the grief of impermanence weighs upon your chest, as it must, remember this: you have walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and you have feared no evil, not because there was none, but because you found within yourself the strength to face it. You found within yourself the power to heal, and more than that, the power to be healed, not by eliminating your darknesses, but by integrating it, not by fleeing from your suffering, but by allowing it to open you, not by clinging to who you were, but by surrendering to who you are becoming. The power of the healed shadow is not in what it allows you to escape, but in what it empowers you to embrace: your life, your love, your purpose, your inevitable death, and beyond that, the great mystery, the mystery that can never be solved, only lived. So live it in the full awareness that you are both dust and starlight, finite and infinite, wounded and whole, broken and beautiful. And when you finally lay your head down at the end of this long, exquisite journey, may it be with the quiet joy of one who did not turn away, who did not numb themselves, who did not shrink, but who stood, fully present, in the heart of their own life. And may your final breath be not one of regret, but of gratitude. Gratitude for the darkness that taught you the value of light. Gratitude for the suffering that revealed your strength. Gratitude for the shadow that led you home. For this is the power of the healed shadow. It does not erase your humanity. It sanctifies it. It does not make you invulnerable. It makes you real. It does not promise perfection. It offers wholeness, and that is everything. So go now, not as one seeking the light, but as one who has become it. Amen.